With the Hood being added to the newest season of Marvel Rivals, I wanted to go over his kit and talk about him as an overall character, since a lot of people probably don't know who the Hood actually is. So, without further ado, let's get started. The Hood, aka Parker Robbins, is pretty consistently a villain, but there are times he does work with the heroes, but usually he's a villain and a kind of mob boss at that. One of the key differences between all versions of the Hood is the power source. Consistently comes from some sort of demon or kind of being of destruction, and this can be someone like Dormammu, Mephisto, or the one in Marvel Rivals, which is Oblivion, who you probably don't know who Oblivion is, but basically one of the original beings of creation who was born at the beginning of the universe alongside like death itself. That's a good example. That makes this version of the Hood probably the strongest one we've ever gotten, because Oblivion is just so much stronger than Mephisto or Dormammu. So he's absolutely much more powerful than either of them. Starting off with his primary fire, he uses dual pistols, and a lot of people tend to compare these to Tank Pool. However, his pistols are actually projectile based, not hit scan. So it's a bit harder to aim at longer ranges, and even though he does have a gun, you typically want to be in the brawl ranges to do the most amount of damage, since his guns have a lot of damage fall off. Then there's his right click, and this is his bubble ability, where he essentially gets a combination of the Magneto self bubble and the Magneto shield, where it's a bubble that covers him completely and can absorb like almost an infinite amount of damage pretty much, but it's only a couple seconds long, so you need to time it correctly. And any damage absorbed by this bubble builds up your meter passive, which will be explained later. Next, we have his Fade ability, which is kind of like Scarlet Witch's Fade, but there's two main differences. The first one is that upon finishing the movement, you get like a bit of an explosive damage around where you reappear. And the other one is that after you exit the phase state, it gives you an extra little boost. So that's a big movement change you might need to get used to, and it also builds up 20 meter of his charge, which again will be explained later. His charge is one of the most important parts of his kit. Now we move on to his shield, or I guess his E. There's two different types of his E, one base and the other with the Moon Knight team up. The base one is just a wall that if you shoot through it gives you like one extra charge of your meter per shot, and blinds anyone who walks through it, and it also reduces the damage by about like 36%, somewhere between like 39 and 33% about. It's kind of unclear to me, but it's somewhere within that range. And I think this was a good choice instead of just giving him a straight up shield, because shield tanks tend to be really strong. So giving him this ability to take damage but not have it be just a straight up shield, I think is a good choice. Now, for the most important part of his kit, the thing I've been alluding to so far is his passive, his meter, which essentially, once it reaches 100%, you enter a sort of half demon state. So basically, at 50%, your primary fire dual pistols get faster fire rate but less damage, and then once you get to 100% charge, you enter a sort of half demon state where your primary fire and secondary fire are replaced by dual rifles, and you have to hold down right click and left click to get maximum damage, since it replaces your shield with a second gun, and so you can't use your shield in your demon state, but you can cancel it early at about 50%, and it'll save half of whatever you have when you cancel it. So basically, if you're at like 50% charge and you cancel it, you get 25% charge, and you basically gain meter through all your abilities. This sort of half demon state gives you life steal. It's kind of very low life steal, but it also gives you overhealth that generates much faster, and it has massive damage fall off. So you really want to be using this up in their face, just spamming it pretty much. And it's definitely the most important part of this kit, because everything revolves around recharging his meter to enter this half demon state. Moving on to his ultimate, and it's a very interesting ultimate. First off, you gain 1000 HP upon transformation. You lose all mobility, so you can't like walk around or use your fade. and you're also pretty much locked out to your base kit. And what you get instead is you get multiple shots from, I guess, your head in this form. Each shot will grant you with overhealth, and it'll also grant overhealth to allies. And each bullet does its base damage and percentage base damage. And the last shot will deal way more damage than the previous ones. Now for the Hood's team up. Starting off, we have the Scarlet Witch team up. This team up effectively allows the Hood to have another sort of escape tool by giving him a sort of teleportation ability where he effectively sets down a small bubble that does damage to enemies, and then he's able to teleport to it within the time frame that the bubble is up. And you can even do this in your ultimate, where if you place down the bubble first, ult, and then you can teleport while in your ultimate to kind of surprise attack your enemies. Personally, I don't really like this one that much because a lot of times I typically tend to be frontline and like fighting against the tanks and only really going on to the supports when I'm in my demon form, which is why I prefer the Moon Knight team up. What the Moon Knight team up does is that it changes his wall to be an actual shield now, giving you 200 HP at base and then 300 with the enhanced team up. And I honestly prefer this one because it's kind of like Emma Shield, where I can block off enemies healing. So like if like a thing is like running into my team, I can cut off his healing for a few seconds, like that kind of thing. And that's why I prefer the team up because it allows me to both be there to support my team more, take more damage, and cut off enemy heals. Even though the Hood has a gun, his playstyle typically tends to be relatively brawl based, since you typically want to be within 5 meters for your guns to do the most they can do. Plus, you have a lot of tools to survive the brawl. You can kind of weave in and out with your fade, and then use your bubble to absorb poke damage from enemies, and then use your wall to block off healings if you're using the Moon Knight team up, or have an extra escape tool with a Scarlet team up. Not to mention in his awakened state, or I guess his half demon state, self heal and overhealth from dealing damage with his primary fire. And that kind of feels like that's kind of similar to the thing where he's able to gain overhealth from his like big punch that he does. So I think the Hood is absolutely better in close range and kind of needs to be in those close ranges to be able to play. You can also flank with him if you're using the Scarlet team up, since you can kind of get in someone's face, use your bubble ability, and then kind of just finish them off from there, especially if you're in awakened state because you just gain back your HP. So you can either play him like a frontline brawler with the Moon Knight team up or like a backline destroyer with the Scarlet team up. The Hood is a very fun character that I'm definitely going to be playing much more of and definitely getting to Lord. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it if you watched all the way through. Please subscribe so I know that if there's anyone out there who enjoys this, so I can keep making these videos. And I won't hold you any longer. Thanks for watching. See you next time.